Michael Whitman's life had already been shaped by struggle, but nothing prepared him for the morning Officer Trent Caldwell came crashing into his world. It started like any other Tuesday in Jacksonville, Florida, the sun climbing lazily over the skyline, the streets filled with the hum of early traffic. Michael had parked at the usual Kroger lot, his mind occupied with errands and mundane tasks, when the sudden appearance of Caldwell changed everything. Caldwell's uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming, but the way he moved suggested he felt above everyone else. He approached Michael with a swagger that only years of unchecked authority could produce. Within seconds, Michael found himself on the pavement, a taser's sting ripping through his body. He felt the raw, almost ritualistic cruelty in the officer's actions. For those first minutes, Michael's mind couldn't process what was happening. Pain and fear intermingled with disbelief. Around him, bystanders froze, some reaching for phones, others paralyzed by the suddenness of violence. It wasn't just a physical attack. It was the embodiment of systemic abuse, a microcosm of the injustices many in Jacksonville had learned to accept silently. In those moments, Michael's thoughts raced to his son, David. He had always tried to shield him from the ugliness of the world, to instill a sense of fairness and integrity. Now, as his body convulsed under the taser's relentless electricity, he worried about what David would see if he ever learned about this incident. Caldwell didn't speak much. Words weren't necessary. His actions communicated everything. Michael's immediate reaction was survival, not resistance. He knew any sudden move could escalate the situation fatally. And then, as quickly as it began, it ended. The officer stepped back, smirk lingering on his face, and Michael collapsed into the asphalt, every nerve screaming, every thought clouded by shock. The aftermath was a blur of paramedics, flashing lights, and the cold, sterile walls of the hospital. Michael Whitman, a man whose life had already known hardship, now faced the cruel reality of abuse by someone sworn to protect. His body would heal slowly, but the emotional and psychological scars ran far deeper. During his recovery, Michael made a decision. This wouldn't just be about him. His suffering would not vanish into silence or paperwork. He contacted attorneys, civil rights advocates, and eventually the federal authorities. Each conversation, each retelling reinforced a single idea. Accountability could no longer be optional. Michael's story quickly attracted attention. Gabriela Mendez, a young investigative journalist, had captured some of the assault on video. The recording, visceral and undeniable, spread across legal channels, fueling the investigation into Officer Caldwell and his colleagues. During a session with federal investigators, Officer James Kelly, who had spent 3 years working alongside Caldwell, broke down when confronted with the evidence.
"I knew Trent was aggressive," Kelly confessed to the training instructor. "I saw him treat people badly, especially minorities, but I told myself it wasn't my business. Michael's case showed me that my silence made me complicit in every abuse that followed." That statement would haunt Kelly for months, but it also marked the beginning of a cultural shift within the Jacksonville Police Department. Internal affairs investigations and psychological assessments revealed Caldwell's escalating misconduct, chronic aggression, and lack of remorse. Prison reports later indicated that Caldwell had lost significant weight, suffered from insomnia, and required protective custody due to threats from other inmates who despised officers with a history of abuse. Meanwhile, Michael Whitman's influence grew in ways he never imagined. Dr. Nicole Bennett, serving her second term on the Citizen Oversight Board, updated him regularly. "Michael," she said during one of their sessions, In the 2 years since your case, we've seen a 73% reduction in use of force incidents and an 85% increase in community satisfaction with police services. Your suffering wasn't in vain. It created measurable, lasting change. The ripple effects extended beyond Jacksonville. Municipal governments in neighboring cities, fearing similar federal scrutiny, began proactively implementing reforms. Police departments that had resisted civilian oversight for decades suddenly embraced transparency, accountability, and community engagement. Michael's courage had sparked a movement. David Whitman, observing his father's journey, found his career path reshaped by Michael's experiences. Now leading the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, David was tasked with investigating officers who abused their authority. His team became one of the most requested assignments in federal law enforcement, attracting agents committed to pursuing justice. Every case David supervised carried the shadow and light of his father's ordeal. During a quiet dinner at home, Michael reflected on the transformation. "Son," he told David, voice low but steady, "I never imagined that the worst day of my life would become the most important day of my life. That young officer thought he was attacking someone powerless, but he gave us the opportunity to demonstrate what real power looks like when it's applied with justice and precision." Every year, on the anniversary of Caldwell's assault, Michael returned to the Kroger parking lot, not to relive trauma, but to measure progress. Community leaders, federal officials, and reform advocates gathered to reflect on how far they had come since that terrible morning. "This spot represents a turning point," Michael said to the crowd during the second anniversary commemoration. "Not just for me, not just for Jacksonville, but for every American who believes badges should protect citizens, not threaten them." Officer Caldwell thought he was demonstrating his power. Instead, he demonstrated the power of accountability when applied properly. Michael's resilience, combined with the dedication of federal authorities and community advocates, created a model for reform that other cities could follow.
Before the gathering concluded, a surprise visitor approached Michael's wheelchair. Marcus Thompson, a young law student inspired by the events that had unfolded. Kneeling beside Michael, Marcus whispered, "I wanted you to know that your case inspired my career. I'm now prosecuting officers who think they're above the law, and every case I handle carries the memory of your courage." Michael grasped the young attorney's hand firmly. "Son, the circle is complete when victims become advocates and advocates become protectors. You're carrying forward something that started long before my case and will continue long after I'm gone." As evening fell over Jacksonville, Michael remained at the parking lot with David, gazing at the plaque marking the exact spot where Caldwell's taser had overturned his life. The inscription read simply, "In memory of all who suffer injustice and in honor of those with courage to fight back through proper channels." David, quiet and reflective, said, "Dad, when I was a child watching you face discrimination, I never imagined we'd end up here, with you as a national symbol of police reform, and me leading the federal unit that prosecutes officers like Caldwell." Michael's hands tightened on the wheelchair handles. "David, every injustice I endured prepared me for that moment. Every case you investigate honors not just my experience, but the experiences of everyone who never lived to see their attackers held accountable. The legacy is secure, the reforms are permanent, and the message is clear. Abuse of authority will face consequences no matter local protection or institutional cover-ups." And with that, Michael Whitman's story had only just begun, a testament to the transformative power of resilience, accountability, and unyielding courage. If this story moved you even for a moment, click subscribe. Every new subscriber helps us keep stories like Michael's alive. Like, comment, and share, because stories have power, and together we amplify voices that were once ignored.
The days following the federal intervention in Jacksonville were filled with quiet determination and strategic action. Michael Whitman had become a central figure in the oversight of the police reforms, but he didn't seek the spotlight. His focus was precise, ensuring that every policy, every protocol, and every officer training program reflected the lessons learned from his encounter with Officer Trent Caldwell. Michael often met with Dr. Nicole Bennett, whose role on the Citizen Oversight Board had become pivotal. She brought him reports detailing the ongoing progress, reduction in force incidents, increased citizen satisfaction, and the establishment of anonymous reporting channels that empowered both community members and officers who refused to participate in misconduct. Each meeting reinforced that Michael's ordeal was catalyzing a movement far bigger than Jacksonville. The transformation wasn't smooth, of course. Many officers resisted, claiming federal oversight undermined their authority. Internal conflicts erupted, old rivalries resurfaced, and some senior members quietly attempted to circumvent new regulations. But Michael, David, and the Oversight Board remained unwavering. Every violation was investigated, every complaint addressed, and the message became unmistakable. Unchecked aggression and abuse of power would no longer be tolerated. Officer James Kelly, the officer who had confessed his complicity, now worked closely with reform advocates. "I can't undo the past," Kelly admitted during a debriefing session, "but I can make sure it never happens again." Michael's courage showed me what responsibility truly means. I was part of the problem. Now I want to be part of the solution. The federal investigation into Caldwell revealed layers of systemic corruption. Internal records showed patterns of misconduct spanning years, with several minor incidents quietly dismissed or hidden. Each revelation underscored the importance of Michael's actions. What began as a personal attack had unveiled a network of negligence and abuse that, left unchecked, could have continued for decades. Meanwhile, David Whitman's role at the FBI expanded. The Whitmans' home, once a quiet refuge, became a hub for strategy sessions. David's team meticulously reviewed past cases, identifying officers who had avoided accountability due to loopholes, local biases, or administrative oversight. Each discovery was a reminder of why Michael's courage mattered, not just for him, but for every person who had suffered in silence. Michael often reflected on the psychological toll of his encounter with Caldwell. Reports from prison noted that Caldwell was now suffering from chronic insomnia, weight loss, and anxiety brought on by threats from other inmates. The man who had once wielded power with impunity was now isolated, forced to confront the consequences of his actions. Michael didn't rejoice in this suffering, but he recognized it as the natural course of justice when accountability is applied consistently. Dr. Bennett often reminded Michael that the reforms were a living process, evolving with each new challenge. Policies were adjusted, community forums expanded, and law enforcement officers were trained to recognize not only misconduct, but also the subtle biases that often preceded it. Michael's case became a training cornerstone, a real-world example demonstrating the cost of inaction and the impact of courage. The broader implications of the Jacksonville reforms began to ripple across the Southeast. Neighboring municipalities, fearing federal scrutiny, proactively implemented measures to improve accountability and transparency. Police chiefs who had once resisted civilian oversight now invited community leaders to observe operations, audit procedures, and provide feedback. It became clear that one man's ordeal could spark widespread change. Michael also became a mentor, quietly guiding others who had experienced police misconduct. He shared his insights with community organizers, civil rights attorneys, and young law students, emphasizing the importance of resilience and strategic action. He wanted them to understand that fighting injustice didn't always require physical confrontation. Sometimes the most powerful response is measured, persistent, and legally grounded. David, observing his father's approach, internalized these lessons. Every decision he made in the FBI's Public Corruption Unit reflected Michael's principles: integrity, transparency, and unwavering commitment to justice. Michael's story had become more than personal vindication. It was a blueprint for federal civil rights enforcement. One afternoon, Michael returned to the Kroger parking lot, revisiting the scene of the assault. The plaque marking the event now attracted attention from journalists, community leaders, and citizens. Children, unaware of the violence that had occurred, played nearby, their laughter a stark contrast to the echoes of that terrible Tuesday morning. Michael observed them silently, reminded that real change often begins with small, tangible improvements in community safety. During a commemorative gathering, he addressed the crowd, his voice steady but charged with emotion. Every policy, every reform, every new officer trained under these principles is a testament to the power of accountability. We are not here to relive trauma, but to measure progress and inspire vigilance. Every individual matters, and no one is above the law. Marcus Thompson, now a newly graduated civil rights attorney, approached Michael after the speech. "Your case inspired my career choice," he said. "I prosecute officers who abuse their authority, and every case I take carries the memory of your courage. You've created a ripple effect I hope will continue for decades." Michael's eyes met Marcus's, and he nodded. "Son, this is why it matters. When victims transform their experiences into advocacy, they protect countless others. Your work carries the torch forward, and that torch illuminates every dark corner of abuse and neglect." As months passed, Michael monitored the Jacksonville Police Department's progress closely. Independent audits confirmed measurable reductions in use-of-force incidents, improved citizen satisfaction, and increased transparency. The city had changed, not because one person forced it, but because the combination of courage, strategic action, and federal oversight created a new standard for law enforcement accountability. David, inspired by his father's determination, often remarked privately, "Dad, it's remarkable how your single act of resilience transformed not just one department, but entire communities." Michael would simply respond, "It wasn't just me, it was all of us. Every witness who spoke up, every advocate who fought for justice, every officer who refused to turn a blind eye, together we made change unavoidable." The impact of Michael's story extended beyond Jacksonville. Federal authorities used the Whitman case as a model in other states, demonstrating how civil rights laws could be enforced. Effectively, municipal governments began creating citizen oversight boards, establishing anonymous reporting channels, and instituting regular training on bias and misconduct. The culture of immunity began to erode, replaced by accountability and civic responsibility. Even within the FBI, David's unit became a symbol of integrity and ethical enforcement. Young agents, inspired by Michael's story, sought assignments in the Public Corruption Unit, eager to be part of a team that valued justice above convenience. The ripple effect extended through generations of law enforcement professionals, each influenced by the courage of one man in a Kroger parking lot. The anniversary gatherings continued, not as a spectacle, but as a ritual of reflection. Michael would return to the parking lot each year, observing progress, speaking to reform advocates, and mentoring the next generation of civil rights attorneys. His presence was a reminder that systemic change requires vigilance, persistence, and moral clarity. Officer Trent Caldwell's incarceration continued to underscore the importance of accountability. Each denial of early release highlighted the principle that abuse of power carries consequences. Michael understood this was not revenge, it was justice, structured and impartial, ensuring that future generations would not suffer in silence. Michael's story, layered with personal pain, public advocacy, and systemic change, became a cornerstone example in civil rights education. Universities, law schools, and advocacy organizations referenced it repeatedly, illustrating the direct link between individual courage and societal transformation. Through it all, Michael remained humble. He rarely spoke of himself as a hero. Instead, he emphasized collective action, moral responsibility, and the importance of structured, legally grounded advocacy. He understood that while one man's suffering sparked change, it was the community, federal authorities, and the next generation of advocates who ensured that the transformation became permanent. By the end of Part 2, Jacksonville had not only confronted its failures, but it also embraced a vision of law enforcement that placed citizens above bureaucracy, accountability above convenience, and courage above fear. The ripple effect, begun in a single act of abuse, had grown into a wave of reform, proving that systemic change is possible when integrity and courage converge. Years passed, and the changes initiated in Jacksonville had grown deeper, embedding themselves into the culture of law enforcement and community relations. Michael Whitman had become more than a survivor of Officer Trent Caldwell's brutality. He had become a symbol of accountability, resilience, and systemic transformation. Yet he carried no sense of
Self-congratulation. His focus remained on ensuring the principles of justice were not temporary, but permanent. Michael and David Whitman continued their private routines of reflection. Some evenings they would sit quietly in their home overlooking the city, discussing ongoing cases, policy reviews, and the broader implications of their work. "Dad," David said one night, "it's incredible how one incident changed so much. Not just Jacksonville, but every city watching, every federal office taking note. You became the blueprint for reform." Michael smiled, but his eyes held the weight of the memories. "It's never about me, son. It's about everyone who suffers quietly, the ones whose voices were silenced because no one acted. What we built ensures they have a chance now." The anniversary commemorations of the assault had grown into full community gatherings. Local leaders, civil rights advocates, and federal officials attended each year, reflecting on the progress made and the lessons still to be learned. The Kroger parking lot, once a site of terror, had become a place of education, vigilance, and renewal. Plaques now adorned the space, each one telling the story of resilience, reform, and community collaboration. Marcus Thompson, the young civil rights attorney inspired by Michael's case, had become a rising figure in federal prosecution. Each year he returned to the commemorations to share updates on the cases he had successfully prosecuted. "Your courage, Mr. Whitman, laid the foundation for every case I've brought forward," he said during one gathering. "Because of you, officers who once thought they were untouchable are now held accountable." Michael's own advocacy had expanded beyond Jacksonville. He was invited to forums, panels, and national discussions on police reform. Yet he remained grounded, always emphasizing the collective nature of change. "This wasn't about me being brave. It was about every citizen, every officer willing to do the right thing, every attorney committed to justice. Together we proved that systemic failure can be corrected with persistence, transparency, and courage." The reforms within the Jacksonville Police Department had become a model for other municipalities. Departments that had historically resisted civilian oversight now adopted transparent policies, anonymous reporting systems, and continuous bias training. Every officer learned that integrity was non-negotiable, and every citizen began to recognize that accountability was achievable. Michael had turned a deeply personal tragedy into a nationwide example of reform. Even within the FBI, David's unit flourished. Agents were now recruited specifically for their commitment to civil rights, integrity, and fearless investigation.
The Public Corruption Unit became a destination for those who wanted to enact meaningful change. And David's leadership ensured that each case reflected the principles instilled in him by his father's experience. Despite the success, Michael never lost sight of the human cost of reform. He maintained close relationships with those directly impacted by police misconduct, offering mentorship and guidance. Survivors of abuse, once voiceless and isolated, now had advocates, systems, and protocols to protect them. Michael's story had transformed personal trauma into communal empowerment. One particularly reflective evening, Michael returned to the Kroger parking lot alone. The setting sun bathed the scene in a soft glow. He looked at the plaque marking the exact spot where Caldwell's taser had thrown him into chaos. The inscription read, "In memory of all who suffer injustice, and in honor of those with courage to fight back through proper channels." He traced the edges of the plaque with his fingers, a silent reminder of the journey that had begun with violence but ended with systemic reform. David arrived shortly after, quietly taking his father's side. "Dad," he said softly, "when I was a child, I never imagined this would be the result, that one terrible day would lead to lasting change, nationwide recognition, and a model for justice." Michael nodded, eyes scanning the now peaceful parking lot. "Every injustice we face, son, carries with it the seed of transformation. The important thing is to nurture it with courage, patience, and relentless pursuit of fairness. That's how we ensure no one suffers in silence again." The years solidified Michael's legacy. Jacksonville became a city known for police accountability, citizen empowerment, and collaborative governance. Complaints were no longer ignored, misconduct no longer swept under the rug, and transparency became the standard rather than the exception. Michael's case was included in textbooks, civil rights curricula, and federal policy training modules. It had become emblematic of how a single act of courage could trigger comprehensive reform. Even Officer Trent Caldwell's legacy became a cautionary tale. His years in prison underscored the consequences of abusing power. Court records and prison reports highlighted his lack of genuine remorse, continued threats from inmates, and failed petitions for early release. Michael never celebrated Caldwell's suffering, but he recognized it as a natural consequence of the accountability system they had fought to establish. Justice had been applied, not vindictively, but consistently. As Michael walked through the community center built in part from federal reform funding, he saw children learning about rights, law, and civic responsibility. He watched local officers engage transparently with citizens, taking questions and explaining their protocols. And he realized that the power of one person's voice, once dismissed and oppressed, could resonate for generations. Marcus Thompson approached Michael one last time during the evening ceremony, this time with a group of young law students. "Mr. Whitman, your story changed not just Jacksonville, but my entire career trajectory. I'm now mentoring the next generation of attorneys who will fight systemic abuse because of the example you set." Michael smiled, feeling the weight of years of struggle and triumph converge in that moment. "Son," he said, "the circle is complete when victims become advocates and advocates become protectors. The work never ends, but the seed we planted has grown strong." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the commemorative crowd began to disperse, but Michael and David remained, gazing at the plaque one last time. It was more than metal and engraving. It was a symbol of resilience, accountability, and hope. Every injustice faced, every challenge confronted, and every reform implemented had led to this moment of quiet triumph. And to you, watching this story unfold, remember this. Courage is not about what happens in public, but what you do when no one is watching. It's about standing up for justice, supporting those who cannot defend themselves, and ensuring that accountability prevails. If Michael Whitman's journey moved you even slightly, here's how you can participate in this movement of awareness and action.
Like this video to show your support for justice and accountability. Subscribe to True Crime Files TV to follow more stories that uncover courage, resilience, and systemic change. Share this video with friends to amplify the impact of stories that inspire reform and hope. Comment your thoughts, perspectives, or key lessons learned. Your voice matters, and dialogue is a part of the change. Every like, every subscription, every share ensures that these stories don't fade into silence. They live on to educate, inspire, and empower future generations. Michael Whitman's story proves that one individual's resilience, when paired with systemic action, can transform entire institutions. And now you can be part of the movement to keep these stories alive. Because sometimes the world is unjust. But together, through awareness, advocacy, and courage, we can make it better.